All right, guys, so I got a pretty revealing clip here from the outgoing U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who has arguably one of the most atrocious legacies that he is leaving behind of anyone in modern American history. And he basically admitted that the core stated goal from Israel and the United States in terms of what they have been doing in Gaza to remove Hamas from power, that has been a complete and utter failure. So we're going to get to that clip here in a second. First, I have a protester here who was calling out Blinken when he was giving this speech at the Atlantic Council. So let's go ahead and watch this, and then we'll get to the main clip that I'm referring to here.
Bloody Blinken, Secretary of Genocide, you have the blood of hundreds of thousands of innocent people on your hands. We have spent a year trying to appeal to your humanity in front of your house. We've written you letters. We've held car rallies. The blood of innocent civilians, of children, is on your hands. We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hold you accountable. We will hold you accountable. Bloody Blinken, Secretary of Genocide.
Bloody Blinken, Secretary of Genocide. Now, we also had another protester, and I won't play this clip because the audio is a little bit difficult to hear, but another protester said, "How can you kill thousands of children? You are a brutal war criminal. You have no compassion. You are a monster." Now, none of the things that this first protester or this second protester said about Antony Blinken are unfounded or unfair. This is the legacy that he has chosen to leave behind, right? Killing tens of thousands of innocent civilians, mostly women and children, and the utter and complete destruction of Gaza, as well as the continued expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank, and wars in Lebanon and in Syria, and confrontation with Iran. This is the legacy that he leaves behind as a U.S. Secretary of State. Again, arguably the single bloodiest, or one of the bloodiest legacies of any Secretary of State in modern American history. Okay, that is the legacy that Antony Blinken is leaving behind. There's a reason why some people make the comparison of him to a sort of modern day Goebbels, right? And I don't think that that's entirely unfair. Now, we get to the main clip that's been circulating around from this speech that he was giving again at the Atlantic Council, where he admits that the main strategic goal of Israel and the United States of removing Hamas from power has been an utter and complete failure. So let's go ahead and watch this clip here.
Avoid. Indeed, we assess that Hamas has recruited almost as many new militants as it has lost. That is a recipe for an enduring insurgency and perpetual war. The longer the war goes on, the worse the humanitarian situation gets in Gaza.
Okay, so first off, no shit, right? This is just Insurgency 101 that we're talking about here. If only there were some people, like myself and many others, who had been pointing this out for over a year now, as you have continued to support full-throatedly and excitedly this genocide that we have all been witnessing inside of Gaza, right? If only somebody had pointed this out. Now, the core of his point here is true on the one hand, but also, again, foreseeable. You cannot keep people in an open-air prison year after year, decade after decade, consistently bombing them, killing people's entire bloodlines, their entire families, destroying their homes. And I'm talking not just post-October 7th, but also pre-October 7th. You cannot keep people under indefinite occupation, subjecting them to violence, subjecting them to ethnic cleansing, subjecting them to a settler colonial project, and expect that there is going to be some sort of a lasting, peaceful resolution to that, right? So when he admits that Hamas has actually recruited as many people as Israel has managed to kill within Hamas, then the follow-up question to that is, so what the fuck was the point of anything that has happened inside of Gaza and the West Bank over the last year and a half? Because this was the main stated goal that you and Israel were using to justify what they were doing in Gaza, of bombing schools and mosques and churches and refugee camps and UN shelters and killing aid workers and journalists. This was the justification. We have to do everything that we possibly can to go after Hamas, to eliminate Hamas, to remove them from power. They cannot remain in power. And now you're saying, well, they've actually recruited the same amount that we've killed. So then what the fuck did you accomplish outside of just endless historic levels of death and destruction inside of Gaza? What exactly did you guys accomplish? And the answer to that is nothing. And the underlying answer to that is it's nothing because Israel never had any real strategic goals inside of Gaza. The goal was death and destruction, right? This is why at the beginning of this, we had Israeli politicians and Israeli officials coming out and openly saying things like, there are no innocent civilians in Gaza, right? We're going to cut off the fuel, the food, the electricity, the water supplies. This is why we had openly genocidal statements from the beginning of this genocide. Because the goal was never some strategic victory over Hamas. The goal was to eliminate the possibility of life inside of Gaza. And that is the policy that you, Antony Blinken, and you, Joe Biden, have been full-throatedly supporting and endorsing and funding and arming and giving diplomatic cover for a year and a fucking half now. And by the way, as we get into the current ceasefire deal that's purportedly on the table right now, it's the same fucking deal from last year, from June or July of last year. And now you have the end of the Biden administration sort of trailing off the incoming Trump administration. We'll get to more of that reporting here in a second. But they come in, apply mild pressure on Israel that Biden has refused to apply throughout the entirety of his administration. And suddenly we get to a ceasefire deal that could have been had months and months and months and months ago. If Israel, if Netanyahu, if Ben-Gvir and Smotrich were not openly blocking every single ceasefire deal that came onto the table at every chance that they got. If Biden had been willing, if Blinken had been willing to use the levers of power that they have at their disposal to pressure Israel into ending the genocide, they could have done it. They chose not to. They chose to be pro-genocide. You could make a strong argument that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the rest of the Democratic Party sacrificed the 2024 election for the sake of supporting this genocide. Now, we also had this clip here that was posted by Owen Jones in terms of Biden re-emphasizing this point that the goal is to completely eliminate Hamas and to remove them from power. So let's just watch this 5-second clip here real quick from 60 Minutes.
Do you believe that Hamas must be eliminated entirely?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe...
Okay, short little clip there, but it gets to the point. This is never something that was going to happen. This is something, you can check the record, that I and many others were talking about over a year ago at this point. That going in and relentlessly and indiscriminately bombing inside of Gaza was never going to eliminate Hamas. It was never going to remove Hamas from power and install some sort of a reasonable alternative or whatever else you want to portray it as. This was never going to work. Again, this is Insurgency 101. If you keep people under occupation, if you destroy their homes, if you kill their families, what exactly do you think that they're going to do when you leave them with no other alternative? You don't even leave them the possibility of protesting the ethnic cleansing, of protesting the occupation peacefully. Because when they try to go out and peacefully protest, as we saw in the March of Return, you kill them anyways. So what other option other than militant resistance have you left Palestinians with? The answer is none. It's none. So again, the idea that, oh, we're going to go into Gaza, we're going to eliminate Hamas, we're going to remove them from power, it's going to be easy, right? This was delusional from day one. And again, it was never really the objective from Israel. This is all part of a broader, decades-long settler colonial project. They used October 7th as an opportunity to do what they have wanted to do for a long time to the people of Gaza. Now, we also had this point here that was argued by Hassan, who is talking about the reporting and the claims here from Antony Blinken that Hamas has recruited as many as have been killed. And he says, well, this is an incredibly common thing that happens in every instance of Western intervention. I can't help but feel like it's partially being reported on to create the groundwork for permanent military action in Gaza out of security concerns post-ceasefire. Now, this is something that you have to watch out for as we get to this supposed ceasefire deal that has just been agreed to. And you have to watch out for, when is Israel going to fire back up their engines, right? When are they going to continue the bombing? When are they going to try to make some sort of a justification to continue the war in Gaza, right? This is not going anywhere. Even if there is a ceasefire deal that is put in place, maybe you make it through the first stage and then Israel decides, oh, we have to go back into Gaza because Hamas is resurging and whatever else the case may be, just be cautious of that, right? Let's try to set our expectations, not that this ceasefire deal is going to result in some long-term peace plan and Palestinian statehood and dignity and sovereignty. No, we know who's coming into the White House, okay? It's Donald Trump, who has filled his entire administration with hardcore, hawkish Zionists, okay? That's who he's filling his administration with. So let's not expect that there is some sort of long-term peace that's going to come out of this. Let's more so set our mindset in terms of, how is this deal going to fall apart? And how is Israel going to find some sort of a justification to go back into Gaza or to consistently bomb Gaza as they continue the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank? Now, here's pointed out as tweeted by, and this is sort of a guy who's known, Shael Ben Ephraim, who's known as sort of like a more liberal Zionist, I guess, if you want to use that sort of terminology. And here's how he portrayed the deal that's on the table. He says, Israel has capitulated on several factors, allowing for a deal to be reached. Number one, Israel has agreed to fully withdraw from Gaza, leaving no troops or security zone. That includes a full withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor. Number two, it has agreed to allow Hamas to rule Gaza. Again, just an admission of complete failure there from Israel. This is not in the agreement, but there is also no mechanism to remove Hamas. Number three, they say Israel has agreed not to exile or release prisoners, but rather to let them into Gaza again. And keep in mind, Israel has been keeping hundreds, thousands of hostages, Palestinian hostages, inside of essentially torture dungeons with no due process, with no trial or no rights, essentially. And they have been doing this not only post-October 7th, it's escalated, but before that as well. He continues, he says, number four, Israel has waived its demand for a list of live hostages. Number five, it has agreed to allow residents to return to northern Gaza with only symbolic security measures. And then finally, Israel agreed to accept dead bodies in the first stage. So I'll link this down below if you want to go read the Al Jazeera piece in terms of the breakdown of the stages of this entire process. But essentially it looks like, I mean, we'll read the first phase here because I guess this is the most important aspect of all of this. And we'll see where it goes in phase 2 and phase 3. But in the first phase, they say it will last 6 weeks. It will involve a limited prisoner exchange, the partial withdrawal of Israeli troops in Gaza, and a surge of aid into the enclave. They say 33 Israeli captives, including women, children, and civilians over the age of 50, taken during the Hamas-led attack on October 7th, will be released. In exchange, Israel will release about 2,000 Palestinian prisoners during this phase, including 250 prisoners who are serving life sentences. Among the Palestinians being released are about 1,000 who were detained after October 7th. They say in tandem with the exchange of captives, Israel will withdraw its forces from Gaza's population centers to areas no more than 700 meters inside of Gaza's border with Israel. However, they say that may exclude the Netzarim corridor, which is the militarized belt bisecting the strip in the middle of it and controlling movement along it. The withdrawal from Netzarim is expected to instead take place in several stages. They say that Israel will allow civilians to return to their home in the north, where aid agencies warn that a famine may have taken hold, and allow a surge of aid into the enclave of up to 600 trucks per day. So suddenly, now that this deal is supposedly in place, we can allow 600 trucks per day. So again, let's remind ourselves of Israel blocking the aid from getting into, especially North Gaza, but the entirety of the Gaza Strip throughout this entire process. They have been willfully and intentionally restricting the aid from getting in to the population that they are bombing and starving, right? They say that Israel will also allow wounded Palestinians to leave Gaza for treatment, and they will open the Rafah crossing with Egypt 7 days after the start of the implementation of this first phase. And finally, Israeli forces will reduce their presence in the Philadelphia corridor, the border area between Egypt and Gaza, and then withdraw completely in later stages. Now, what happens in the later stages? Yet to be seen, right? Yet to be seen whether or not we even make it through the first 6-week stage of this entire process. So again, that's what I'm keeping a close eye on at this point. What is Israel actually going to do? Are they going to follow through on the terms of this agreement? Are they going to find some sort of a justification to go back into Gaza to, emphasize or to, continue the bombing in Gaza at a significant pace? All of that is yet to be seen. I think a large part of this is the Trump campaign, the Trump administration is coming in. They want to win at the beginning of this. He wants to pretend to be the peacenik. I ended this. And, maybe there's sort of a window there where things cool down for a little bit, but then it picks up after the Trump administration begins. But a lot of this is just speculation, right? Now, we also have this here as pointed out by Maha Husseini, who says that the hours preceding a ceasefire have always been commonly known among Gazans as the hours of revenge. And so, as has taken place in previous conversations surrounding ceasefires, now we have the Israeli army attempting to inflict maximum damage in the shortest time possible, and there is relentless bombardment in the central and southern Gaza Strip. Now, I have seen reports of dozens and dozens of people who have been massacred over the last couple of days, so Israel loves to use these sort of opportunities where peace is relatively on the horizon to inflict as much death and destruction as they possibly can at this point. Now, we also had this reporting here from the Jerusalem Post, which shouldn't be surprising, but is also a good reminder here that the Israeli government have been the primary blockade to this sort of deal happening a long time ago. Their headline here from the Jerusalem Post is Ben-Gvir, the Israeli Minister of National Security, admits to preventing hostage deal on numerous occasions. So he admitted this and was bragging about it because he is against any sort of deal that leads to an end to the Israeli genocide in Gaza. He would love for it to be entirely cleansed of any sort of Palestinian presence whatsoever, and for the Israeli government to fully annex the Gaza Strip. And so he's going around bragging about how many times he managed to kill any sort of peace negotiations. Now, we also had this point here from Glenn Greenwald, following up on reporting from Ynet News, I believe. And he says, it's not a surprise to anyone honest or clear-eyed, but it will make left liberals utterly confused and lost. Israeli media and Netanyahu's closest allies are adamant that Trump forced them into a ceasefire deal for Gaza that they didn't want, something that Biden never tried. Now, I'll circle back around to this here, but we also had this. This was reported again by Ynet, I believe, about Trump's Israel First agenda. So they're reporting that the U.S. has promised Netanyahu, right, via Trump, that they will wage a war against the ICC to protect Netanyahu. Well, they're already on their way of doing that. Covered in my previous video a few days ago that the U.S. passed a bill through the House of Representatives that is essentially designed to protect Netanyahu from the International Criminal Court. So that part has already been checked off. They also say that Trump promised to lift sanctions on Israel's Pegasus spyware, which is arguably the most advanced spyware on the face of the planet right now that Israel has been using, as well as selling to other foreign countries as well, and using for nefarious purposes, even potentially against Americans. They also say that Trump promised that Israel could break the Gaza ceasefire and restart the war whenever they want, and also that they support Israel's illegal land grabs in the West Bank. Now, this is the main thing that I think people should be looking at, because regardless of whether or not Israel follows through on leaving Gaza or if this ceasefire deal ends up working, there's a reason why Miriam Adelson gave upwards of over $100 million to the Trump campaign when he was running for office. The reason was for him to overlook Israel annexing the West Bank. That's the reason. So again, regardless of whether or not this ceasefire deal plays out or it doesn't, the ongoing ethnic cleansing, the ongoing settler colonial project is absolutely continuing, right? This issue is not going anywhere. It may be something that, Americans or American politicians or the media pushes to the side, but this issue is not going anywhere. If anything, the violence on the ground, the colonialism, the ethnic cleansing on the ground, especially in the West Bank, is going to escalate under Donald Trump, right? So if this ceasefire ends up working, and we have this analysis, like as Glenn Greenwald was pointing out there, that Trump is responsible for this because he pressured Israel to fall in line and to finally agree to a ceasefire in Gaza, that does not mean Trump is pro-peace. It doesn't mean that he's some sort of reasonable actor in this situation. No, he is entirely bought and paid for by the pro-Israel lobby, right? That is who Trump has been, it's who he's always been, and it's who he is right now coming into his second administration. Again, it's not just the money from the donors like Miriam Adelson. It's also, look at who he's staffed his administration with. Hardcore, hawkish Christian Zionists, for the most part, right? Who would love to see Israel fully annex the West Bank, and many of which would also love to see them annex Gaza as well. So again, this isn't going anywhere. It's not as if, oh, Trump came in and he saved the day and he's pro-Palestinian and whatever else the case may be. No. If anything, this is maybe just a situation he didn't really want to have to deal with coming into office, right? So he says, wrap this up by the time that I get in, and we can have further conversations about the rest of this. That's sort of the approach that he's going with here, right? He's not a peacenik. He's not coming in to save Palestinians or anything like that. If anything, he is going to make this situation worse. And that's extremely clear from not only reporting like this, but also, again, the history of who Donald Trump is and, who's being staffed in his cabinet, who his donors are. This is all extremely clear. So there you have it, guys. There are your updates now. This deal, it looks like it may potentially go through. I hope that it does, so that the people of Gaza could have some sort of relief from the, death and destruction that they have been experiencing for a year and a half now. And let's remind ourselves of both the danger of the incoming Trump administration, but let's also not let, politicians, media figures, members of the Biden administration, Biden himself, get away with skirting around what their actual legacy is. Okay, we know where all of you guys stood. You're not going to be able to rehabilitate your image. You're not going to be able to pretend as if you were always against this 5 years from now, several years from now. That's not going to happen. We know exactly what you guys did to help to perpetuate this genocide, and this is the legacy that will define you in the history books.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying